Bismillah and welcome to the Life Matters event, topic being overcoming depression and anxiety. Now, inshallah, just as a heads up, the event is being recorded for the first session while the speakers are on. So, hello to our Facebook audience. And inshallah, the camera is facing the speakers, so the audience is not in it, and there will be photography, but it will be from the back and you won't be identified. So thank you so much for coming out on a Friday night. I guess you're all tired, drained, and it's been a pretty heavy week to listen to a pretty heavy topic. So inshallah, where possible, we want to have this as a relaxed, engaging night where we connect, where we, discover and talk about some pertinent issues. But inshallah, where we leave uplifted and feeling that sense of connectedness. Now, just to start off with some housekeeping rules, the door, welcome through. If you do want to go to the bathroom, inshallah, it's out to the left and left again just in the building next door to us. In the event that there is an evacuation, I'm sure Jinan's singing voice will get us out. That's the bell for tonight. Inshallah, emergency evacuation point is at Paul Keating Park. You are on the ground to, I'm going to come up with something hippie to connect and, ground and things like that. But if you are uncomfortable at any time, there are chairs, and there's also chairs in that room. There is also some water available if you do need refreshments. And inshallah, the program for tonight is we're going to start off with the 4 speakers going through their sessions. We'll have a short break for salah and a stretching exercise, and then we'll come back inshallah for an in-depth Q&A session. So that's the time where you really get to engage with the speakers, nut out some of the topics that they covered, and really have some of the key concerns that you came here for tonight answered. And inshallah, then we'll finish off with a visualization exercise as well as a dua. So it's going to be quite of a program and quite packed. So again, welcome and thank you so much for coming. Now, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on whose land we meet tonight. And I think it's also really important in acknowledging the traditional custodians on a trauma-based topic. It's a generation that's been dealing with intergenerational trauma for many, many decades. And I think discussing a topic like depression and anxiety, it's really important to actually know on a wider and national scale what some topics like this actually mean for communities and generations. Now, I can see some of you are a bit tense. Now, the whole point of that intro was to sort of relax you. So since that hasn't worked, I'm going to relax you even further by asking you to just, without moving too much, but just within your vicinity, choose a person that you don't know well or you've just seen right now and turn and face them. So I just want you to be in pairs facing a random. Right along, alhamdulillah, now that you're all relaxed. We'll move into our first topic. Our first topic is by Jinan, who's a health professional. And I say that, we have to give you a professional slide today. Jinan is a lady of many talents. Some of you that attended the camp might have seen her amazing singing and acting capabilities. But for tonight, she's a healthcare professional, currently working in gyno at the hospital. So if you do need, and you're all women, so you're going to need a given point, just book her in a session with Jinan. And Jinan's topic, inshallah, tonight will be on the significance of mental health disorders, definitions and symptoms. So we'll be starting off with that topic for tonight, inshallah.
We're going to clap. Alright, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Allahumma shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. So today we're talking about overcoming depression and anxiety. So as depressing as the topic is, we're going to try and put a positive spin on it. The whole point of today is basically to help you to feel empowered and to have the motivation to defeat the burden of depression and anxiety. It's no secret that depression and anxiety is a very, very common mental health problem. In fact, mental health disorders generally have become increasingly common in today's society. So today we'd like to shed a bit of light on this, and we'd like to overcome the stigma in society related to these health conditions. We all know that there is a bit of stigma in society around depression and anxiety. People don't like to talk about it much. We don't really like to share our personal experiences with other people, when in fact you never know that your friend or your family members could also be suffering with the same thing you're going through. And I think everyone in this room can say that they've either personally had an experience with depression and anxiety, or they know a friend or a member in their family who's going through the same thing. And this is why it's very important for us to talk about these things, to increase the awareness and spread the knowledge about these disorders, because knowledge is power. And the more we know, the more we can do to change the stigma and to change the incidence and the prevalence of depression and anxiety. So if we can leave today and we can propagate that knowledge to our friends and to our family members, you never know that ultimately that knowledge will reach someone who really needs to hear it. And maybe even if you're not yourself struggling with depression and anxiety, just you talking to someone who has it, showing them that you understand what it is and that you're there for them, it could save someone's life. And it really can. So let's talk about... Wait, what do I do? Oh, wait, no.
There's arrows on the bottom. There's arrows at the bottom of the screen.
All right, we'll get there. So, all right. So can someone tell me, let's think worldwide, okay? How many people, without cheating from the previous slide, how many people are currently suffering with depression, do you think? Give me a figure. Huh? No, as a number. Worldwide, give me a number.
25%?
Like million or
Million.
Yes.
Million. Obviously, million.
340 million.
You read the slide. All right, so 350 million people in the world right this moment are depressed, and we're talking clinically depressed. 45% of Australians will experience some sort of mental health illness during their lifetime, so that's pretty much, if we round it up, 50%, 1 in 2 people. These figures are huge. 1 in 3 women, because we're all about women's health, will suffer with anxiety at some point in their life, right? So out of your group of 3 or 4 friends, 1 of you will have an episode of anxiety throughout your life. I think it's important to stop here and just a little disclaimer that feeling sad or feeling, having fear or worry is normal. They're normal emotions. It becomes a problem when it's excessive, when it's exaggerated, when there's no real stimulus to cause you to feel that way. And that's where we differentiate normal emotions from health issues like depression and anxiety. We live in a world where it's imperfect, and we all know that, because the perfect place is Jannah. And this dunya will never compare to Jannah. So it's only natural that we're going to have good times in this life and we're going to have bad times. And when you are in those bad times, you're going to feel sad, you're going to feel anxious, you're going to feel worried, and that's normal. They're feelings that alert us, first and foremost, that something's not right and I need to do something about it. And they also encourage and motivate us to change something in our life. So we have to all agree that, they're useful emotions, and we can't expect that we're going to be happy 100% of the time and we're always going to be euphoric, because that's another mental health disorder on its own. But we won't go into that today. So basically, if we can just understand that we're talking here about depression and anxiety as mental health disorders, not as normal feelings that we experience on a day-to-day basis. So let's talk about depression. When we talk about depression, it's basically a depressed mood or a low mood that lasts longer than it should. It lasts for prolonged periods of time. In addition to feeling depressed, you're also losing interest in the things that you would normally do. So I know some people here in the crowd like to hang out with their friends, and they have these get-togethers pretty much every night. So if they stop doing that, then that's them losing interest in what they normally do, or whatever it may be: sports, socializing, going out for coffees, anything like that. Things that you're interested in and things that help you feel good. If you stop doing that, we call that anhedonia, which is basically the technical term for you don't like doing what you normally, or you don't have the motivation to do what you normally do. Along with that comes with feeling guilty, feeling worthless, and the thoughts that go through your head of, I'm not worth anything, life isn't worth living, etc., etc. Now, why is it important to overcome these feelings? When you feel that way, you're not functioning to the best of your ability, right? You don't feel well, you don't want to leave your bed, you don't want to go out and be a functional person in society. Our role on this earth is A, to worship Allah, but B, to be the best possible version of ourselves that we can be, and that's emulating the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So our struggle with depression, our struggle with anxiety is really jihad. It's our struggle, it's our striving in the way of Allah. And once we have that intention, it really gives us the motivation to strive to be the best possible version of ourselves that we can be. So let's talk a bit more about the symptoms of depression. So feeling sad, feeling anxious, self-loathing thoughts like I'm not worthy of anything, no one loves me. I know I say that a lot, but no, seriously. No one cares about me, this life isn't worth living, I can't find any joys in life, etc., etc. In terms of your behavior, obviously you're not going to be willing to go out and socialize with people because you feel like you're not worthy of that. You want to just stay at home and do nothing. You'll start falling behind in your, be it study or work or whatever it may be. So really it can overtake all aspects of your life. And that's why it's important for us to be empowered to overcome that. Now, let's talk about anxiety. Having fear and worry, like I said before, is normal. Anxiety is when you start having those feelings for prolonged periods of time when there's no real stimulus or anything to cause you to feel anxious or worried. Now, we can't talk about anxiety without talking about the stress curve. Hands up who's seen this curve before. All right. So basically the stress curve shows that having optimum levels of stress or certain levels of stress is good. It motivates us to function, motivates us to perform, motivates us to change things that need to be changed in our life. And that's when you're functioning to your optimum. So you're looking at performance, and the bottom line is your stress level. If you have too little stress, then basically you're not really motivated to do much. Now, when the stress becomes too much, or it's at really, really high levels, then you start burning out, it overcomes you, and you can't function to your best ability. Now, we have to talk about the fight or flight response. Who's heard of that? Yeah. So I'll tell you a story from my childhood. When I was younger, we were living in Lebanon, and one day I decided that I'm going to go to the corner shop and just go for a walk and probably buy some junk food. And you know, in Lebanon, kids just walk about, it's a normal thing. Anyway, I have this irrational phobia of dogs, which is why this talk is great for me. So I saw a dog from a distance, and I have to admit it was a pretty small dog. Immediately, warning bells went off in my mind. There was no logical reasoning, and I couldn't tell myself, Jinan, it's just a small dog, you're going to be fine. No, warning bells go off, right? So a part in your brain, when you're faced with something that's scary, for the rest of us to relate, for example, that was my equivalent of being attacked by a bear, for example. If there's a bear coming at you, there's a system in your body that immediately switches on. That's called the sympathetic nervous system. We'll talk a little bit about the nervous system. So everything in our body is created in perfect balance. And that's part of Allah's wisdom and part of Allah's mercy. If you look around you, everything in life is pretty much in perfect balance. So that also reflects in the human body. So there's the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, and they work to balance each other out. The sympathetic nervous system is your flight or fight. It gets you really going. The parasympathetic calms you back down. So when you're faced with something scary, in my case, a small dog, very far away, your sympathetic nervous system turns on. It's a part in the brain, warning bells start going off, danger, danger. That stimulates the adrenal glands, or another part in the body, to start secreting the stress hormones. They're things like cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline. They flood through the body. So what does that do to you? Your heart starts beating really, really fast. And anyone who's ever had a panic attack will relate to this. Your heartbeat through the roof. You start breathing very shallow and very quick. You feel like you start getting chest pain, and you feel like, I'm gonna die, I'm having a heart attack. Your skin starts sweating because your body's trying to release heat. The body is basically diverting all of its energy stores and all of its blood supply to the brain and to the heart. So things like the bladder and the digestive system, they relax, and that's why sometimes you can soil yourself. What else? So your muscles start getting a lot of energy, and that's why you hear about people who are in very stressful situations get this sudden burst of superpowers, and they can run faster than they normally would. And I was a pretty chubby child, so I ran pretty quick. So that's basically the flight or fight response. And we can all agree that in a really stressful situation, that can save your life. But that becomes a problem when it starts getting activated when it doesn't need to be activated. So you've taken away that scary stimulus, you've taken away the stressor, and you're still getting these symptoms. And that's when you start feeling like, I'm gonna die, I'm having a heart attack, chest pain, I'm gonna collapse. By the way, it's almost impossible for you to collapse in that state, but you do feel like, I'm going to die. And that's anxiety. That's when you're constantly being activated when there's no stimulus. And the more that happens, the lower the brain's threshold for that to happen. So it's very empowering and very important for us to recognize that this is just the body being activated for no reason. And I'm sure Khadija and Wendy will go through, and Dalya will go through some techniques to help us sort of deal with these symptoms and try and prevent it from getting activated. The more you can control it, the more it becomes easier for the brain not to get activated that quickly. So I have a bit of a diagram to go through some of the symptoms. So your mind's racing, your vision gets blurry because, subhanAllah, the pupils will dilate in a very stressful situation, and that helps you to see sort of far distance. So anything within your immediate vicinity gets a bit blurry to the point that you can't even recognize facial expressions and things like that. You get a dry mouth, I have a bit of that right now, and your heart starts racing, like everything that I said before. You start feeling very restless, like if you're, for example, in the middle of a lecture theatre and you start feeling panicky, the first thing you think, I need to get up, I need to move, right? That's that system being activated. Okay, so now that, as any good doctor does, we've recognized what the problem is, I will defer you on to someone else to help come up with a solution.
Thank you so much, Jinan. Next up, we have Wendy Sawtell. Wendy is a clinical psychologist and has 20 years of experience in the field. She also has a Master's of Islamic Studies. Wendy works with clients from an Islamic perspective, and I've actually, working in the field of domestic violence, I've actually referred a lot of clients to you. Alhamdulillah, the positive feedback that we always have from clients is that when you're able to find that clinician that can combine industry knowledge with that Islamic perspective, then as a Muslim you feel a lot more empowered to be able to take that journey on. So inshallah, Wendy's topic is quite interesting, the meaning and purpose of depression and anxiety.
Thank you, Tasneem. Very kind introduction. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's really good to be here with you. The title was chosen deliberately because I want to invite you to think about depression and anxiety in a very radically different way. I want you to abandon the notion that depression and anxiety are illnesses or conditions to be gotten rid of or medicalized or snuffed out with tablets. I want you to consider that depression and anxiety are companions that visit your life from time to time with a very, very key message to you. A message that you can learn from, grow through, and develop characteristics that are going to enable you to move through your life journey in a much more effective way. Next one, please. Just click this. Okay, so what I'm going to try to cover in the 10 minutes is talking a little bit more about stress, extending on what Jinan had spoken about. Talk about standard orthodox psychological methods that we use in mainstream psychology in Australia and around the world in managing depression and anxiety. One of them being cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT for short. I'd also like to contrast that, and especially to show you the parallels between Islamic psychology, that in Islam we have an abundant amount of concepts and understandings that actually line up with evidence-based scientific psychological practices. And that's been very exciting for me when I did the Master of Islamic Studies, to be able to detect those patterns from an Islamic perspective. And of course, I want to show you some marvelous, amazing scientific facts to do with water. And water for us Muslims is especially significant because we do wudu with water, we have Zamzam water, we say Bismillah over water before we drink it. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, so what is stress? So as Jinan was touching on, there is healthy stress. You need a certain level of stress. In psychology, we refer to stress as arousal. It's like an engine that needs to be churning at a certain level in order to be constructive and productive. So you need to just G up to do what you need to do. And that's healthy as long as you achieve an optimal level that gives you maximum motivation and energy to do what you need to do. When it's problematic, it becomes de-stress. So when we start to overstress, then all of our faculties shut down, or a lot of them do, and then we become incapacitated by the stress. One common definition of stress is that stress is what happens when there's an imbalance between, it's a bit of a tongue twister definition, so I'll just explain it to you. So say for example you have a task to do. Your belief about whether or not you can do it and the task demands, if you think that you can't do it, that you have this amount of resource and it requires this amount of resource and you're falling short of what it needs to do that task, the net effect is stress. Does that make sense? So it's basically the conclusion that you can't. If you perceive that your life has more than you can cope with, then the byproduct of that is stress or de-stress. The reason stress is significant for our discussion today is that it's helpful to think of stress on a continuum as beginning like good stress, healthy stress, excessive stress. Prolonged stress can amp up towards the other end of the continuum, which then taps the door of anxiety. So anxiety is a much more acute state of stress, but it's moving along the same brain mechanisms. And prolonged stress, unresolved stress, or unmanaged stress can cause a lot of illnesses. We're talking stroke, heart disease, cancer, just to name a few. Okay, so, and of course depression and anxiety are often preceded by prolonged stress. So the next question is, what do we do about it? And of course we can't cover all that needs to be covered. It's more like a 10-day lecture rather than a 10-minute lecture. But we're going to try and look at, in terms of what to do about your stress, it's really important to understand stress, which is why we're having this introduction, and anxiety and depression. The second step is to understand what are the sources of your stress. Like if we were a car and you go to a mechanic's, he's going to try and identify what's broken, what needs to be fixed specifically before he goes in with an intervention, right? There's not a one band-aid or one size, one approach that fits everybody. There's no toolbox of strategies that we apply to every single client that we get and then we're just going to send them home happy with it. Everyone's very unique, everyone's extremely different because their life circumstances are different. The way they think and function in their lives are very unique to them. So it's important to identify or learn to identify your own sources of stress, and that takes a lot of awareness, a lot of education, and a lot of knowledge. And that's why throughout the presentation, I want to emphasize to you the importance of ongoing learning, seeking knowledge, understanding self, understanding the world around you, understanding your deen, understanding the scientific, whatever's coming to the fore for you, particularly as mothers, because an empowerment of a woman is an empowerment of her family unit, her children, her husband, her household, and then the progeny that comes from that. So we're very, very important figures in society. Right, so the third step is basically to learn stress management strategies and problem-solving strategies and applying these until they become habits. What's so good about a habit? It eventually becomes effortless. It eventually becomes automatic. That should be our end goal, inshallah. Okay, so this is the most popular approach in psychology. There's a number of different schools of thought in psychology, like a lot of other professions, but this is the most popular one in Australia and around the world. This is our usual toolbox that we work with clients, of course, in a very individualized manner. So the number one thing, well, it's not really in order, but one of the things is setting up a goal. And of course that sounds like intentions in Islam, doesn't it? Creating a niyyah. We even create a niyyah before we do wudu, before we do salah, before we do a good deed. We always clarify what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. And that creates a sense of way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us against a state of heedlessness, the opposite of that being way. Be aware of what your intentions are and then have a strategy to achieve them. The next one is problem solving. Life is full of problems, just one problem after another. And the capacity to solve and process problems is a very important life skill. If you don't learn it as a child, you need to acquire it through adolescence or sometimes in adulthood. Time management, of course, is really important. SubhanAllah, if you look at our salah times, it's like a diary. If you're not a literal person or you don't like pen and paper stuff, oftentimes people, Muslims in particular, will say, I'm going to do such and such before Dhuhr, after Dhuhr, before Asr, after Asr. So our day is chopped off into 5 neat segments, and it gives us a sense of continuity of time and management of our tasks. The next one is self-talk. This is what I'm going to be focusing on after this slide. I'm just giving you an overview of the toolbox. Relaxation, otherwise known to us as salah, meditation, contemplation and reflection. Some of the skills include communication, relationships and parenting skills. A lot of the issues in families are around deficits in those departments. Lifestyle factors, healthy habits, diet and exercise. And I'll throw this one in, that's my thing. Develop a passion for learning, which is a way to self-empowerment. Okay, so, all right, this is the crux of self-talk or CBT. And you see, this is the most powerful thing I've learned in the 20 years that I've worked as a psychologist. This is the most powerful universal equation I've come to learn and understand, which is this very potent connection between our thoughts, feelings, behavior, and our physical reaction. It's very simple. And I guess symbolically, think about it like this. You think, you feel, then you act. Oftentimes we're not aware of what we're doing up here. We're not aware of our thinking, so we're in a state of ghafla. And you can't blame people for being like that, because of the 70 thoughts that we have every single day, most of them are unconscious. So if you're not aware of what you're thinking, you can't control and manage your thinking. And that's a very, very, not dangerous, but very, very unsettling way to be. So awareness of your thoughts is absolutely critical, because through your thoughts you can then manage your feelings. Through that you can manage your behavior and your physiology or behavioral reactions. Okay, moving on. So being aware of your thoughts. In psychology, we basically teach clients to firstly become aware, then note their thoughts. So write down exactly what you're thinking. In an Islamic sense, I like to encourage Muslims to understand the Islamic perspective, which lines up with the Western psychology that says we have a lot of negative thoughts, 70,000 negative thoughts a day. Islam says the same. The work of Al-Ghazali tells us that the shaitan inspires us to think negatively all day, every day. If you listen to the satanic suggestion and you don't censor that, you don't edit that, you don't listen and rebuke that, then it takes hold. Then it creates a negative emotional response, which then of course informs your behavior. But from a Western perspective, we ask clients to identify their thoughts word for word so that they can see them more objectively, how they make them feel, identify the emotional byproduct of that, reality test them. And I'll throw this one in, which for us Muslims means reflect on Islamic ways of thinking. Ask yourself, what would the Rasulullah say about this? How did he deal with similar situations? What would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala advise me to think in this situation? Or how should I perceive it? Do not trust your thoughts. They're your worst enemy. Because your thoughts, my thoughts, everyone's thoughts are authored by shaitan. No matter how good you become at monitoring your thinking, you will never eliminate negative thinking. Okay, so this is my way. This is not deen, it's not sunnah, it's not out of any scholarly stuff. This is how I like to conceptualize the whole CBT model. I think of a person as a tree, and I think of the root system as being what we call in psychology the schema. The schema is like the mind map or the mindscape that is established from the time you're born. So every single human experience you have lays down a certain connection, like you associate things with things, like Jinan associates a dog with danger, so in her mind it's like it's set. So it's part of her root system. All kinds of constellations are taking place at the root system. Out of the root of any tree, the roots feed then into the trunk. The trunk then forms the beliefs that you acquire over a lifetime. Beliefs about anything and everything, right? And they intertwine to create the main trunk of your belief system. Out of the belief system branches out attitudes, perspectives, ways of thinking of things, assumptions that we make about self, others, and the world that we live in, right? We often take for granted, or we assume, that the way we see things is the way that they actually are. We don't. Reality, external reality is one thing. Subjective reality, the way you interpret reality, is a completely different game. And of course, the leaves are the thoughts that spring from the branches. So when I say depression, the meaning and purpose of depression, when you're depressed or you're anxious, that depression is telling you something. It's telling you there's something wrong with me. There's something not right with my structure. It might be a diseased branch. It might be some fungus or mold growing at the root system. And this is where your why comes in. Ask yourself, why has this depression visited me? I don't think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us to have depression and anxiety like willy-nilly random. I don't think it was an error in His creation. It has a purpose. So if you embrace it, you grow to be a better person through it. And in terms of this notion of leaves, from an Islamic perspective, I've got to keep switching hats. But from an Islamic perspective, imagine that the 70,000 thoughts you have every day that are floating past or attaching themselves to your leaves, they might be insects, they might be vermin, or they might be mold, right? Then you need to ensure that you brush them off as quickly as possible before they seep down into your branches and then down into your trunk and into your root system. So as a psychologist, when I'm working with someone, I don't say, oh, let me just teach you problem solving. Let's jump into goal setting and set up what goals you have. That would be just not foolish. But you wouldn't want to be snipping at the leaves when you can get to the core or the root of the problem, right? So you work with that person, you understand what's going on in their life, how do they relate with people around them, how are they managing stresses, how are they coping with pressures in their lives. And then you identify systematically where that problem might lie. The other issue that we face in the West is that as Muslims and Arabs, some of us are born here, some of us are not born here, we have parents from different cultures, different nations, different levels of spirituality. The amount of information that's forming our base, our root system, it can often be conflicted. And that creates what we call in psychology cognitive dissonance. It means when you hold two beliefs that are at odds with each other. And the outcome of that is that you experience a lot of stress and anxiety. Unless one cancels out the other, you feel like you're at odds or confused. And for a lot of people, that could be a no-go zone. It's too hard to think about. Or oftentimes the conversation in social circles is so shallow that it's hard to grow through sharing with other people, particularly if depression is stigmatized. Nobody wants to tell their friends that they're depressed or anxious. But wouldn't it be amazing if they did? And the amount of conversation or the nature of the conversation that would flow from that. So the challenges are quite significant for us. All right, let's move on. Now you have that in your mind, shall we explore it further? Okay, so here I've outlined what mainstream psychology says and the Islamic perspective, and you can see the similarities are very stark, subhanAllah. So psychology says that there are 70,000 thoughts a day. Often they're below awareness, and the vast majority, if not nearly all of them, are negative thoughts. Islam says, if you look at the work of Al-Ghazali, for instance, that shaitan is the author of our every thought, particularly negative thought. So he's authoring it for you. So you don't just accept it, blindly accept whatever thought occurs to you. Psychology says that negative automatic thoughts cause emotional and behavioural response. We've already established that. Islam says that positive mental health is achieved through dispelling satanic suggestions and propagating in your heart space, capacity for the angels to inspire angelic suggestions for you. Mainstream psychology says that as a result of this process, you experience improved mood and subsequent behavioural response, and you do. But the problem is it could be temporary. If you're not addressing the whole person, the whole tree system, it might just be a temporary fix. You might experience a temporary elevation in mood. You might go for a walk, exercise, do this, do that, and then you're okay for a while. But what good is that if you're not addressing some of the family issues, some of the relationship issues, some of your, deeper issues, yes. So this stream produces enhanced mental emotional health and behavioural regulation. Pay attention to behavioural regulation. Behavioural regulation, self-regulation, is about, in Western world, having self-discipline, impulse control, being able to delay gratification, like putting off a reward until you've exerted a certain amount of effort. A lot of mental health conditions suggests that people with severe mental illness or mental health conditions have a lot of difficulty regulating their emotional world, their behavioural world, their external world. Intrinsic and extrinsically, they're just struggling to regulate themselves, right? In Islam, we have a very interesting formulation that says you have your nafs, you have your intellect, you have your qalb, you have your ruh, and they're oftentimes at odds with each other. We suppress the nafs, we tame it through fasting, salah, self-discipline, that sort of thing. So it's an inbuilt mechanism for self-regulation. And additionally, spiritual growth, which is not really a big thing in Western psychology. Okay, so in a nutshell, meaning and purpose of depression and anxiety is basically a signal that something is wrong and needs your attention, not avoidance. That there's a lack of synergy or coherence flow from the root system through to the leaves, and vice versa. Sometimes, if you think something often enough, and it's triggering that signal to your root system, you can change the structure of your root system too. Like if my son went out with boys that drank and went clubbing and this and that, after a while, it doesn't matter how spiritual he is, that will break him, that will rewire his root system. It's simple. Doesn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in Surah Al-Baqarah that if you try and influence your friends and it doesn't work, walk away? We're all vulnerable, we're all susceptible to these things. Okay, need to determine the source of the blockage, to determine the inflammation or disease and treat accordingly. And you have to look for where the possibilities lie. It might be intrinsic or personal, for example, unhelpful or incompatible thinking about a situation or a worldview, or it might be something external to you, like we said earlier, some extraneous factors like family, financial pressures, all the common stuff. All right, so back at uni, one of the dilemmas that we faced, and we couldn't answer back then, back in the 80s, was we know that thoughts are very powerful drivers of emotions and behavior, but science at that time could not work out where this mind-body connection happens, right? Because thinking is some metaphysical kind of, you can't shove it in a test tube thing, and the physiological emotional response was something you could measure in a lab. Since that time, alhamdulillah, there's been this amazing researcher called Masaru Emoto. I'll show you a little clip about him. I incidentally came across this at one of the conferences. This guy was doing research on water, just water, and he was studying the structure and form and shape of ice crystals. So water after it's been frozen. So in a nutshell, what he did was, he would get a body of water and he would put a piece of paper around that container with foul language on it, and then he would freeze the water, and he noted that when the language was foul, the crystals were deformed. grossly deformed. If you took the paper off and then put another paper on with inspiring language, and interestingly, regardless of what language, if it was beautiful language, the water crystals would alter and become symmetrical and beautified. SubhanAllah, it's absolutely amazing. What percentage of our body is water, guys? 80%. And what percentage of water on the planet? 80%. SubhanAllah. Takbir. Alright, have a look. How are we doing? Done? Oh, just 2 minutes? I just wanted to show them some pictures. It's too hard to pass the book around. Okay. Okay. Interestingly, one of his students was a Muslim. This is a Japanese researcher. And he told him about Zamzam water. You guys need to Google this yourselves. And he studied Zamzam water and he found it was the purest, most potent water on the planet. He also found that it didn't have one crystal, it had 2 crystals, one above the other. SubhanAllah, it's called Zamzam. And there's other images on YouTube that show you how water responds to Quranic verses as well. Yeah, here's the book. You can pass it around if you want to, maybe afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is it working? Maybe we'll try to get it working in the break, inshallah.
Yeah, maybe later.
Yeah. Now, next up, we've got Khadija. Khadija is a certified food, lifestyle, and wellness coach and personal trainer who's also completed a Bachelor of Health Science specializing in personal development, health, and physical exercise. Khadija operates Connect to Wellness, a holistic wellness and lifestyle coaching service that supports women, especially mums, to make the changes necessary relating to mind, body, and spirit in order to live their best lives. So I guess now it's about the practicalities, further to Wendy's presentation, in terms of the topic which Khadija is addressing this evening, and that is the gut-brain connection, simple steps in diet to overcome depression and anxiety.
Thank you, Sophie. And it's nice to be here with everybody tonight. Assalamu alaikum to everybody in person and on Facebook Live. This is so cool. First event I've ever participated on live. So inshallah tonight I wanted to talk about the role of the gut in relation to depression and anxiety. And subhanAllah, just listening to Wendy's talk, it's raised some really important connections subhanAllah, through psychology. It's all connected. To start off, just click it anyway. Sorry, it's a little bit small. So to start off, I just wanted to reintroduce the concept of looking at yourself holistically. The main point that I want to get across today, one of the main points, is that it's never going to be just one thing. Okay. Often in our times and working as a personal trainer, my experience with people with a problem, we always want a quick fix. Like if I could give somebody a pill and they didn't have to exercise, they would gladly take it 20 times a day if they had to, if it meant they didn't have to get up and go to the gym and do the work. So we've got a mentality of, wanting very simple solutions for very complex problems, and I think our thinking has become very narrow-minded in terms of, our treatment for many ailments. And obviously in the medical profession as well, if you have something wrong with your heart, you'll go to a cardiologist. If you have something wrong with your hormones, you might go to an endocrinologist. So we have become very segmented, and I think, mashallah, the beauty of this workshop is that we're coming back together again. I feel, all of us being here today is testimony that we want to seek wholeness. We're seeking that connectedness, but not just within ourselves, but within a group, a supportive circle. So if you can think about holistic health and well-being in that way, you're off to a really good start. And I think for overcoming depression and anxiety, it's so important to understand that it's multifactorial. Like Wendy was saying, it's never going to be just one thing. It's not just ever going to be, I think so negatively, therefore I'm going to get depression and anxiety. You've also got, in this holistic model, it encapsulates anything, any problem that you have, or any topic on the face of this planet can be looked at in a holistic way. And if you think about, I don't want to say the wrong thing, because I haven't done, mashallah, masters in Islamic studies and things like that, but from what I understand, Tawheed or unity is all about collectiveness. It's about the coming together of the whole of many things. So if you look at the model, the first quadrant is all about the I am. So Wendy touched a lot upon this. So it's your thoughts, your beliefs, everything that makes up who you think you are. Okay. So this is known as the personal interior. And then we go down to the collective interior. So what do we collectively think and feel and believe? Okay, it has a really big influence on any outcome that you're going to try to achieve, particularly with overcoming depression and anxiety. Because like Wendy said, and Jinan as well, overcoming the stigma of depression and anxiety is a huge barrier to actually overcoming it. You know, if you've got to be the strong one, always putting on that happy face, for example, in your family circle, then that's going to be a really dry, sterile environment for you to seek warm, loving, empathic support that you're going to need to overcome it. Similarly, if you've got a friendship circle or in our community in general at large, if you've always got to have that strong, self-sacrificing, you know, you've got to be that woman who gives her all and, you know, a lamb to the slaughter kind of personality, martyr, you know, that's exactly right. You know, how is that going to affect, you know, you on your journey to seeking wellness and wholeness, okay? When we move over to the personal interior, so that's talking about everything that we can measure of our bodies, so your heart rate, your blood pressure, your size, everything that you can diagnose, ECGs for example, behaviours as well are things that you can measure. And then we've got the collective exterior, so that's everything we can touch. These are all the things that human beings have created, so the buildings that we live in, the structures that we are surrounded by, the systems that we're in, the traffic. How bad is traffic on stress and anxiety, right? We've created that. So it's important to start thinking about everything that makes up us, our heart, everything that's going to affect us, and hence our mission, inshallah, to overcoming depression and anxiety that we might be experiencing. So it's all related to what the other speakers have said, inshallah. Oh, sorry, I've clicked out. Oh, wrong arrow. It tricked me. Okay, so inshallah, just beginning to introduce the gut-brain connection. So has everybody heard of the gut-brain connection? Is everybody familiar with that concept? MashaAllah, that's fantastic. You know, because it was only a few years ago that I became familiar with the gut-brain connection. I think I came to learn about it in my mission to cure migraines. I've been a chronic sufferer of migraines. So learning about the gut-brain connection was absolutely a breakthrough, alhamdulillah, in my own health journey. So the brain can communicate with the gut and the gut can communicate with the brain. So an example of that might be if you think about food, so your stomach will start to release digestive enzymes and juices even before you've started to eat. For example, an example of how the gut would affect the brain, so if you've got inflammation or you've eaten something that causes a lot of inflammation in the gut, for example, you might feel pain, but how do you feel pain? It's obviously going to send a signal to the brain, which is going to signal that you have pain, okay? Another interesting point about the gut is that, subhanAllah, the main nerve that leads to the brain through the vagus nerve, if severed, it doesn't actually stop the gut from functioning. The gut can still digest and eliminate and move things along the digestive tract even without that connection to the brain. So it has its own, what they call an enteric nervous system, subhanAllah. When we're considering the connection between anxiety and depression and the gut, there's been a lot of research, mashallah, and more is coming out and more interest is being taken in terms of the gut microbiota, so also known as the gut flora. Has anyone heard of the gut flora before? It's a buzzword now. Take a probiotic, you know. So everybody's, you know, had some sort of interaction now with gut flora. It's very, very, very interesting, subhanAllah. And there's still, the jury's still out, as they say, but a lot of research has confirmed that the health of your gut has a huge impact on your moods and your well-being. Inshallah, in the questions and answers, I'm happy to share a few stories that's happened in my family and with myself around that issue. So I'll give you an example. So they took, one study, they took rats and they had sterilized gut. So they had no bacteria in their gut whatsoever. And then they took a sample of people, human beings, not human rats, human beings, with chronic depression, severe chronic depression, and they took samples of their gut flora or microbiota and inserted it into the rats. And after that, the rats began to show behaviors of depression. So it shows that once you and they've done more studies on mice as well, where they've inoculated different types of bacteria to test if certain bacteria actually produce irritability, anxiety, and depression in them, and they found that it was true in studies time and time again. So that's a really interesting thing. And the other thing that came to mind when Wendy was talking about the 80%, of our body is water, and 80% of the planet is water, is the importance of understanding and respecting our human body for what it was created from. We are created from the earth, and our bodies now are a walking symptom or a walking proof of what we've done to the planet. Our guts are very, very compromised. The majority of people on this planet have some dysbiosis, which means that there is an imbalance of good and bad bacteria in our guts. We have, like, for every one human cell in the human body, there's 100 bacterial cells. Okay, so we're actually walking around more as bacterial beings, than we are human, right? Everything, all of the gut bacteria inside our digestive system weighs about 1 kilo. So it shows how powerful it is in our body. It's a really huge system, subhanAllah. And the thing about the connection between the earth and our bodies is we have pretty much sterilized the earth. Modern agriculture today, we've pretty much wiped out the majority of soil life. Underneath the ground is millions and billions, like in 1 teaspoon they say, like, I don't know how many billions of cells and living microorganisms are in each teaspoon of dirt, subhanAllah. But through modern agriculture, with the chemicals and the pesticides and the fungicides and everything, every kind of eyed that is out there to kill anything that wants to eat that plant is destroyed. Okay? In nature, the plant has natural defenses against these fungus and parasites or bacteria. But we've made it so sterile, the ground, so that when we're consuming these plants, we're no longer eating the life force energy and consuming the defense mechanisms that this plant is supposed to give us. Not just that, but we are meant to have what the dirt has, and we're not getting it because the dirt doesn't have the microbiota in the soil. Does that make sense? So you can start to understand, if you go back to the 4-quadrant system, the systems that we've created as human beings to create the food that we're consuming, we've tarnished. Okay? So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about food in the Quran, to eat that which is halal and tayyib, you can understand the implications of the opposite. So starting right from the farming level, what have we done to our food? So it's just something to think about, okay? And it puts organic food into perspective. You no longer see it as, oh, that's really expensive. You now see it as, that's tayyib, that's pure. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for us to eat for our bodies, Should we get the right arrow? Okay, so also one other thing that's very important in the gut, the microbiota is very important in actually creating serotonin. So 90% of our body's serotonin is actually created in the gut. And as some of you might know, serotonin is a feel-good hormone that we need to feel motivated, confident, and well and happy. Okay. A couple of tips, inshallah, from the Sunnah. So Rasulullah emphasized the health of the gut. He said the stomach is the well of the body and the veins drink from it. If it is healthy, the veins pass on good health. If it is sick, the veins pass on poison. SubhanAllah, I don't need to elaborate on that. We also said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that the stomach is the well of the body. So, and Hippocrates apparently 2,000 years ago also said that all the root of all disease starts in the gut. But we have Rasulullah, who had that knowledge and is imparted onto us. When he ate, he sat in a relaxed position. It's really important here to note that when you are anxious or eating on the go, you're down in the last morsel of food from your kid's plate because you're just about to run out the door. What's actually happening is when you're in that heightened state and your sympathetic nervous system is aroused, they work in balance, like Jinan was saying. When your sympathetic nervous system is activated, your parasympathetic nervous system, which is involved in repair and digestion, is suppressed. So can you imagine consuming food on the go and your parasympathetic nervous system and your digestive process is saying, not now, go survive, you've got to fight a lion. Do you understand? So eating on the run has really huge implications. It's better not to eat. If you're stressed, just wait. You won't starve, I promise, just wait. Chewing our food is really important, subhanAllah. It's also advice from the Rasulullah. A good mantra to remember is drink your food and chew your juice. So everything that you need to eat, like solid foods, chew it until it's liquid. And even the liquids that you drink, mix it with your saliva, chew it. mix it up so it goes down with a bit of saliva, because that saliva will help you to digest whatever you've consumed. Unless it's Coke, not much can help. Using miswak, obviously, and fasting. Fasting in and of itself is a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is instructing us to take care of our digestive system, of our bodies, cleaning ourselves out, okay? And subhanAllah, when you fast, the point of fasting is to raise your spiritual awareness, right? So that's showing us that the mind and the spirit is connected to the gut. In all, the Rasul Sallallahu has obviously encouraged us to look after our health, physically and spiritually. Just a few tips, inshallah, before I finish. Quality drinking water is really, 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 really important, as Wendy was saying. If you can access, a high quality filtered water, if you're using a reverse osmosis filter, it takes a lot of the minerals out. So know what is under your bench at home if you have a filter. If you do have one, add a little bit of salt, not so that it's salty, but just so that it's heavy. And it will help you to stop running to the bathroom all the time, okay? Because if your water is naked, they say it doesn't have a lot of minerals, it'll pass through you very quickly. Another thing about water, don't go out and drinking bottles at a time. Your body can't absorb it. You will be in the loo shortly after. So just have a sip every 20 minutes or so, and your body, inshallah, will absorb that. Unless you're dehydrated, doesn't matter what you put into it, you'll use it. Obviously, whole organic food, as we've mentioned. Gut healing foods, so who here does soups from meats and bones? MashaAllah, beautiful. Inshallah, in a short period of time, we'll have the whole room putting their hands up, cooking these traditional foods. Most homes in the past had stocks brewing all the time, had crock pots designated just for that. And in the past, nothing of the animal got wasted. Bones were always boiled and used, subhanAllah. There's so many minerals in bone broths that help to repair your gut wall, inshallah. Fermented foods are really important, things like sauerkraut, kefir, a good probiotic if you don't have the time to make fermented foods. High quality fats, dark chocolate, more than 75%, can give you a bit of a boost. One serving, not one serving, one serving. Looking at your vitamin D, particularly in winter, is very important. They call it seasonal affective disorder. So going to a good naturopath or a Chinese medicine or herbologist or even a good GP will help you, inshallah, with a good prescription. Blueberries, herbs, there's so many herbs that you can consider. This is all food for thought, sisters. It's not a prescription, okay? These are just ideas to show you that there's so much out there that you can do today to help yourself. This is not an exhaustive list. It's up to you to go and explore and learn and seek what you want to start with small first, one thing at a time, okay? I encourage you to take it step by step. We need to stop doing drugs. Caffeine and sugar will make you feel anxious and will, make your depressive symptoms worse. I can't say it any more politely. It's going to make it worse. If you have anxiety, really don't have coffee after lunchtime. And try and have 1 cup a day and try and make sure it's organic. Coffee is the most sprayed plant on the face of this planet. Coffee has the most pesticides and harmful chemicals in it than any other food that you can consume. So if you're going to have coffee, have it organic and have it in the morning with food, inshallah. Artificial sweeteners are known excitotoxins, okay? So they absolutely muddle with your brain. They cause brain cell death. What an excitotoxin does, like aspartame and MSG, for example, which is pretty much in every processed and packaged food that you're going to find, it excites the brain nerves, the brain cells so much that it can lead to brain cell death. Does that make sense? So you just need to see a kid after a cup of Coke, or even yourself, the energy that you get after having a V. Really, we've messed with our internal biochemistry. Let's return to what it feels like to have natural energy, inshallah. We can get there. We used to be there before we created all these amazing foods to get us through our anxious days. See the cycle? Genetically modified foods, obviously they inherently have the pesticides and herbicides in them, so we're wiping out our internal microflora. The other thing to think about is that some side effects of medical drugs also have anxiety as a side effect, so checking with your doctor or pharmacist about your medications and also the combined effect of medications. Sometimes even foods can trigger anxiety attacks in people, like smoked foods, MSG, some excitotoxins, and investigating food intolerances. A couple of lifestyle strategies, reducing stress. I think Wendy touched on that. Joyful experiences, a good tip to have for joyful experiences, get a sheet of paper, split it into 2, and on one side write down everything that's stressing you out, everything, just get it all out of you, okay? It's a good first step. And on the other side, write down everything that you enjoy, everything that makes you feel like time stops, I'm in the flow. You're having a joyful experience. You know, it might be a while since you've had a joyful experience. Make it up. What might you find pleasurable? What did you used to find pleasurable? Write it down and commit to doing one thing a week that leads to a joyful experience. Just make that promise to yourself that you're going to do at least one thing this week, inshallah. That gives you that sense of satisfaction and peace, inshallah. Earthing, grounding, so walking around barefoot on the ground for half an hour a day will absolutely decharge you, subhanAllah. And nature, getting rid of the negative ions, let the trees take it away from you, they can handle it. They'll give you oxygen back, inshallah. And the last thing, inshallah, just on breathing, is it's very important to breathe through your nose. When in your nose, you have a high density of parasympathetic nerve endings. So when you actually breathe through your nose and it passes through the turbinates, it tickles those nerve endings and releases the parasympathetic nervous system, which is involved in repair and digestion. It's the opposite of the excitatory nervous system or the sympathetic nervous system. So breathing through your nose, particularly when you're feeling anxious or all the time, mouth breathing on its own will increase your stress response. Okay, so walking around shallow breathing all day long, you'll feel anxious by the end of the day, even if you didn't have anything to be anxious about. Okay, so nose breathing, slow deep breaths, inshallah. One last tip, sorry to sneer, if you're having an anxiety attack, one way that you can help yourself to overcome it is by using a fit ball, the round exercise balls, and laying over it so you're stretching from the sacrum to the throat and actually breathing through your nose slowly and deeply and feeling the air tickle your nose and stay there on your back, so expanding your chest, and breathing through your nose, inshallah, and that can help you get through an anxiety attack. Inshallah. Okay, that's it.
Khadija, thank you so much, and there's a lot of food for thought, and I think, again, if you have the questions, write them down, inshallah, so we can come back to them during Q&A, and don't forget them. Just a question from the audience, can we get a copy of the slides? So inshallah, the speakers will be sending that out to those who registered. So if you haven't registered and you're just lacking, please make sure that you leave your email, inshallah, for that to come through. Now, last but not least, before we take a break from the speakers, have salah, and then come back to our Q&A, we have Dahlia. Dahlia is a life coach, has also completed the Master of Islamic Studies, humors us on our halaqa days by doing ahwal al-nas, which is pretty much the state of affairs where we just went, and that's halaqa for the day. Now, she'll inshallah be wrapping up the series of talks with the Islamic approach for dealing with pain and suffering, and 5 daily prophetic habits to get us through, inshallah.
Is that please sorry? Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. I just would like to start by thanking the sister speakers here tonight. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them for taking the time out to come and share their knowledge with us. May Allah reward every single one of you. And secondly, acknowledge every single sister here attending on a Friday night. You must have had a really hectic, busy day, subhanAllah. So for you to come, I find women who seek knowledge inspiring. So you all inspire me. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you first and foremost. So my topic, Islamic approach for dealing with stress and anxiety and depression. Oh my God, in 10 minutes? That's like, I could talk about the title for 10 minutes. For those who know me, subhanAllah. So that's a really big challenge, but that's why we have the Q&A afterwards, inshallah, where we can actually delve into more detailed things about the topic. So basically with depression and anxiety, I just want to start with this. Depression is not a sign of your low iman. Okay, because we've heard that. Just want to make that clear again. It doesn't mean when you have anxiety or depression that you've got low iman. It's basically a myth that a believer shouldn't be sad, because the Prophet ﷺ used to get sad. There was actually an entire year of sadness when Prophet ﷺ's wife Khadija passed away and his uncle Yaqub alayhi salam lost his eyesight from sadness. And these are the best of people. These are the most knowledgeable, the most spiritual, connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They used to feel sad. So sad is actually an emotion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, and we have to honor it and acknowledge it. It's one of the more than 6,000 or 5,000 emotions that we have, subhanallah. So that's just to make sure that everybody understands, has absolutely nothing to do with your as a believer, in terms of your iman and whatnot. However, how does Iman relate to depression? Because a lot of people speak about Iman and depression all the time, which is what I'm doing right now. Is that Iman protects you from the helplessness and despair that comes with anxiety and depression. Does that make sense? So it's like your buffer, it's like your insulation from that. Because it's okay to get sad, but Islamically, a person with faith and belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and understands the dunya and sees the dunya from an akhirah perspective, from akhirah goggles, so they're not seeing dunya as dunya, but they understand the reality of this dunya, they would not have despair. And that's where a lot of us go wrong, and that's where Iman plays a part. So basically, Iman directly helps you in conquering the depression. Okay, so depression, there's so many definitions, and the sisters, Allah Yazim al-Khair, shared with us a lot of definitions about depression. I really like this very simple definition because it just makes sense to me. It's when when your life conditions are not the same as your blueprint or your expectations. So you're living a life, but you want something else. Right? Plus, add to that a sense of despair and lack of control. It's a really bad formula to get us subhanAllah. So that's what depression is. So basically, your life conditions don't match what it is that you want. And in that, I just want to emphasize that, isn't that dunya? Just a reality check here. What is dunya? This is not paradise. This is not perfection. If we want a reality that is basically identical to what we're living, that's in paradise. So this entire world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created as a test for us. So it's very, very important that we realize this. So, and a lot of people go through that. So these are just basically some foundational concepts before I get into the 5 habits from an Islamic perspective and how you can actually conquer stress, anxiety, and depression. But I find this is very, very important to understand. So the heart and mind, so sisters, please lend me your hearts for the next 7 minutes. Don't listen with your ears or with your whatever. Listen with your heart. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most important faculties that He created are the heart and the mind, right? So without a heart, what are we? Dead. It's Friday night. Without a mind, a person with a pumping heart and no mind. So they're alive. They can be alive in machines, but they're not alive as well. So the 2 are the most important faculties that we have that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. And what happens is that we get depressed and anxious when the 2 are not in line. When the 2 are not working in harmony with each other from an Islamic perspective, subhanAllah. And everything in our deen is there to teach us and encourage us to put the 2 in line. So they support each other. So basically, when the mind says something and the heart says something else, how do you reconcile that, subhanAllah? So it's important that we resolve this disharmony between the heart and mind, because the heart, subhanAllah, this is something interesting I read the other day. Einstein said that basically the heart, so resolve this harmony between the heart and mind, because the heart is he calls the heart as a sacred gift and the mind as a faithful servant. I love that so much because it's in line exactly with our Islamic teachings, because there's another saying by Ibn al-Qayyim that says exactly this. Ibn al-Qayyim says the truth, I'm actually going to say it in Arabic first because I just love the Arabic, it just means it has more depth in the definition. So Ibn al-Qayyim says فَأَمَّا الصَّوَابُ فَمَحَلَّهُ فِي الْعَقْلِ وَمَبْدَأُهُ فِي الْقَلْبِ وَمَزْرَعَتُهُ وَثَمَرَتُهُ فِي الرَّأْسِ. So I'm going to explain that. So Ibn al-Qayyim is saying the truth is in the mind, so basically, but it begins in the heart. And its plantation harvest is in the head. So from what I just told you, I hope I'm not confusing anybody. What's more, who's king, the heart or the mind? The heart. The heart. I've got that in there. A mistake. So the heart basically guides the brain. So I'll give you an example. If you love somebody, it starts where? From your heart. Your heart will start sending messages to your brain to find good things about this person to like. So you start filtering out everything bad they do. You just like seeing all the good things in them. And that works the other way around. If you don't like someone, khalas, you've just established this person, no. For me, your heart, subhanAllah, you start just filtering out everything good they do. Although they might be a good parent, they might be a good spouse, they might be a good Muslim, they give to charity, you stop seeing all of that. You're just focusing on how horrible they are, right? So it starts from the mind, and that takes me to the first most important point about this whole thing. Happiness. Is there such a thing as happiness in Islam? Yes or no? Yes. Yeah? Okay, the word actually doesn't exist in the Quranic terminology or in the Sunnah, right? We have another word for happiness, I'm going to come to that shortly. But subhanAllah, why did I start with, okay, I should go back. Why did I want to mention happiness first? Because it starts with the heart. Because if the heart is okay, and there's basically two phrases or two meanings of happiness in Islam, and they're mentioned in the Quran, طمأنينة القلب وراحة البال. Both, صلاح البال. They're both وأصلح بالهم in a few verses in the Quran, and then ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب. When you have a مطمئن, a peace heart, and you have a salih bal, like a bal that is peaceful, that is not anxious, the opposite of anxiety and depression and overthinking and worry, right? And you have that together, that's the max happiness you can get in this dunya. Right? So it's the state of the heart and the mind. It's both. What's interesting is that, when people say, ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب, brother, just or sister, make dua, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, read Quran, you'll feel the depression will go away. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب, not العقول. ألا بذكر الله, the hearts find peace and rest, not the minds. It's a very important distinction. But ultimately, when the heart is at peace, that's where you start, that will send as the sisters were saying before, the correct messages to the brain to settle it down. Does that make sense? So it's very, very important that we start with our hearts. And it is that mudgha that the Prophet ﷺ said that إذا صلحت صلح سائر الجسد. If that mudgha, if that heart is good and is at peace and is fixed, everything else in your life will be fixed. But unfortunately, we start with what's sometimes urgent and stressful, not with what's important. So when we want to fix our depression and anxiety, we start going and doing all these other things on external things, but we forget the foundation. You have to start with what's important. And subhanallah, as I said, so the طمأنينة القلب comes with the dhikr, and the goodness of the mind, صلاح البال, comes with dua, because it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فأصلح بالهم وأصلح بالهم, mentioned twice in the Quran. The second thing is our understanding and acceptance of the word, just pain and suffering. When we think about pain and suffering, when we think of depression and anxiety, death, illnesses, trauma, we think of these things as painful experiences and suffering. We should, as Muslims, we have a different paradigm about what pain and suffering is. The Quran and Sunnah, basically, throughout the Quran and Sunnah, anytime Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about pain, or the Prophet ﷺ is talking about pain, they're talking about it in a way that just asks you to reframe it. Rasulullah said, "Inna amra al-mu'mini kulluhu khair." The matter of the believer is all khair. Anything, if something bad comes your way, it's khair. Everything's khair. Subhanallah. If your son or child dies, it's the most terrible. We can't even comprehend that. It's a very, very painful experience, right? What's the reward? They wait for you by the gates of Jannah. So subhanAllah, every single thing that is difficult and is hard in our deen and it is painful, there's always the opposite. It's about we call that in NLP and PD, reframing. So reframing the meaning. And that's exactly what the Prophet ﷺ asked us to do with every single thing that we have in our lives. See the meaning, understand the meaning, and that's basically wisdom in its ultimate and purity. So when you see the wisdom in something, subhanAllah, you start realizing, oh, this bad experience actually made me a more compassionate person. This experience, I was speaking to this psychologist the other day, and mashallah, she's amazing at what she does, like the sisters here, mashallah. And I was like, why are you good at what you're doing? Like, what makes you, you connect with people, you're so compassionate, you're so amazing. She's like, and you know what her answer was, subhanAllah? She said, I went through the most difficult life ever. I know exactly what suffering is. So when somebody comes to me and they're suffering, I connect, I relate. I would do everything in my power to help them stop suffering. I just can't stand I can't stand seeing anyone suffer. So she comes with that. She brings that to her practice. She brings that with dealings and with other people, subhanAllah. So she was able to reframe her pain and suffering, and she was extremely traumatized as a child. Like we're talking about trauma. We're talking about sexual trauma, we're talking about poverty, we're talking about, lack of love from parents, abuse, everything that you can think of. SubhanAllah, she was able to give that another meaning and use it to benefit herself in this dunya and others and in the akhirah, inshallah. So there's a beautiful saying by Ibn Ata al-Secondary, subhanAllah, and again I'm going to say it in Arabic for those who understand Arabic, and we've got that translation there. إنما يؤلمك الألم لعدم فهم عطاء الله فيه ومتى فتح لك باب الفهم من الألم عاد الألم عين العطاء. So what that is saying is basically, you're in pain and suffering because you just don't see, just because of your lack of understanding of the goodness in that pain. And once Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides you to seeing that goodness in that pain, things will just go back to normal. SubhanAllah. I just love that. I love those things, SubhanAllah. They just, they're really deep, SubhanAllah. Okay, and it's very important that we remember pain. This dunya, as I said, it's not paradise. But everything that happens in our lives is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us to drive us back to Him. And I'm not sure about you guys, but the closest I have been to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is when I'm most in pain. I remember the last time I was super happy and I went, cried and made dua and prayed qiyam. I actually don't do that when I'm happy, unfortunately, although I should. But usually, when are we making the most dua? You know, when we're in pain, when we're sick. So it actually does get us close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's with me. I don't know about everybody else, because sometimes pain for some people can actually drive them away. You know, but for me, what works is that I find that I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more, that I get closer to Him, that I want to become a better person and a better believer when I have those challenges and problems, and we all have them. And the biggest problem, you know, a problem that we all share as humans, you know what it is? It's not wanting to have any problems. And that's impossible. Every single person in this room here and watching and in the world has a problem in their life, subhanAllah. Every single person. They think it's the worst, they think it's a max. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just, so I don't believe that, you know, personally. Because Allah would not give you what you cannot handle, and Allah is just and He's the most merciful. So, again, I like this flower metaphor. I also use it with my clients often. So think about a flower. You see a flower on the outside, it's beautiful, it's got those beautiful, pristine petals. That's what you see on the outside. But the core of that flower, the foundation of that flower is in what? Mud. Darkness, disgusting mud, right? That's what it is, subhanAllah. So what's interesting is that the flower can't actually grow without the mud. Yet, as I said, its petals are bright and pristine, and it's still detached from the mud, right? So it's not separating from it, yet it's not identifying with it as well. Does that make sense? All good? Okay, this news that I've got 2 minutes, so I'm going to rush through the rest somehow. Okay, so basically I'm going to quickly go through those acts of worship. Don't look at, unfortunately, we've become so accustomed to the acts of worship that we do, the fara'id in our day, and the things that we have to do, that we just do them in autopilot. You know, you just get up to pray and you pray. I really think we need to pause and just reflect on how can I renew my relationship with my ibadat. Okay, so I'm praying. Why am I praying? The Prophet ﷺ, when he used to pray, what did he used to say to Bilal? Arihna biha ya Bilal. So ideally it should give you raha. If we're praying and we're not getting the raha, the rest, then are we praying in the way that we're supposed to be praying? It's just very brief things to reflect on. Dua. So dua is not just, you know, putting your hands up and just saying everything that you want in chest, although that's part of it. It's understanding and knowing there's no power like dua. Absolutely no power. It's like a superpower. And Allah gave that to every believer and every person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Ud'uni astajib lakum." No conditions. You don't have to be the most pious person. Ud'uni. Just ask and I will give you. So if you have a problem or you're struggling or you're suffering from something, how often are you making dua? Once? Twice? Or are we asking dua from everybody else? From our family, our spouses, our children, our psychologist? You know, we're asking all these people, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, we ask Him last. So there's another saying by Ibn al-Qayyim, it's a beautiful saying where he says, if a problem is really big, a problem is not big enough until you get up at night and you pray qiyam for it and you make dua. So unless you get to that stage where you're actually there, because the dua in the qiyam is basically straight away answered, subhanAllah. And dhikr, I could talk about dhikr for the next 7 hours, subhanAllah. It goes line in line with depression and anxiety. Because if you go through the adhkar, especially the sabah and masa, they're phenomenal. They're basically your insurance for the day from all these, diseases, subhanAllah, right? Even like there's one beautiful one about, there's actually a dua in the adhkar about depression and anxiety. You guys know which one that is? من الهم والحزن جزاك الله خيرا. الهم, which is ish. Ham is worry, future, anxiety. I seek refuge, Ya Allah, from you, from ham, and from al-hazan, from sadness. Sadness is usually to do with the past, depression. So imagine doing that twice a day, every day. SubhanAllah. And then finally, patience, which is, patience, we say sabr, sabr, sabr. We've lost that connection with this beautiful virtue that was mentioned more than 70 times in the Quran. Sabr, subhanAllah. When I think of sabr, I think of thinking gently. When you're just crazy and angry and, it's that opportunity for you to be rewarded and just taking time out and think in a gentle manner, in a gracious manner, subhanAllah. And that by itself, subhanAllah, relaxes you. Because sometimes, and I like this, and I read this somewhere and I loved it, it's actually dangerous to do anything else. Sometimes the best thing you can do is not do anything. But in that time, let's call it patience and let's practice it. That's the best thing you can do sometimes. There's nothing you can do. But accept that this is what it is and embrace it as it is. And trying to get the most out of, sometimes we don't have option A. I know a sister whose husband passed away recently. and she kept going back to, she wants him. He's not, option A doesn't exist anymore. So what can we do right now? It's life, it's the reality. Have sabr and have patience and try to get the best out of option B. Okay, number 4, this is, subhanAllah, I help my own clients with overcoming anxiety with this. And you might think, what is this? This is one of the most rewarded acts of worship that few people do, subhanAllah. And it's to do with the mind. It's called husn al-zan billah subhanahu wa ta'ala, husn al-zan. To thinking in the brain, mind, right? Because anxiety comes and happens in the brain. So thinking good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And knowing, subhanAllah, that you've got access to that all the time. So again, I'm not going to go into detail because of time, but the husn al-zan basically brings this unbroken safety and certainty. Because if I was to ask you now to think of the worst problem that you have right now, think about it for a second. We're actually going to feel the energy of the room go down because everybody's going to be, yeah, it's true, right? So your breathing will be, subhanAllah, physiologically, and everything will change. Think about that. Get there 9 out of 10. Make it really, really intense. And in that moment, when you're experiencing that really difficult anxiety episode or fear or worry, instantly break it by thinking good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Husn al-dhan. I'm going to practice husn al-dhan with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah's there. Allah's listening to me right now. He's watching me. He's taking care of me all these years. He will never let me down. That's husn al-dhan. Honestly, don't you guys feel just instantly just removes that? It's like a rock. When I do that, in my worst times, I think Allah's with me. I've survived the worst so far, and I haven't died yet. So if you've survived the worst that you've been given, what makes you wonder that you can't or worry about that you're not going to be able to survive? He's been there with you in your most vulnerable times, when you're like a little baby that had nothing, no power, powerless, literally, subhanAllah, right? So he's there. Just have husn al-dhan and practice it every single day. And the other one is, and I love that one, I'm going to end with that one inshallah, is, and that's to do with the heart. Remember, husn al-dhan, practicing husn al-dhan it's a mind practice, and tafweed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's a heart practice, okay? And Islam, the word Islam in itself, our faith is called Islam. What's Islam? Peace and surrender. Istaslama. Istaslim to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are we really mustaslimin to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with everything that's happening through our lives? Istislam with peace. Islam, surrender with peace. That's what Islam is. Peace and surrender. Do we surrender and we struggle? Do we surrender and we fight? SubhanAllah, what are we doing? How are we embracing this whole identity as a Muslim? So SubhanAllah, I want to give you just end with this exercise. Before I end with the exercise, I'm going to come back to the tafweed, but I just want you to think about the word tawakkul, okay? So tawakkul is basically, there's a lot that has been written and said on tawakkul. For me, when I think of tawakkul, I think it's about thinking only of the destination and nothing in between. That's just tawakkul. Look at Allah. I've got that end in mind, Jannah. Allah's going to be there, He's going to support me. Well, how it's going to, fold out, carry out, happen, Allah only knows. I can plan it, but He's the best of planning. But I do what I can do. Tawakkul is a hard practice when you can't necessarily see, but in your heart you know, and that knowing becomes your guiding light to see by so you don't stop. So nothing makes sense, that it's just that thing within that and have you met people who have tawakkul? Like, in the most and the worst and most difficult of times, there's that, something about them. They're like rocks. And if they've got that invisible thing, subhanAllah, they carry everybody, subhanAllah, and they lift everybody in the most difficult of times, subhanAllah. Tawakkul is to take a step forward into the unknown or area of difficulty without a solution in mind. That's trust, that's tawakkul. I don't know what's going to happen. None of us know what's going to happen in anything. I don't know if I'm going to be able to speak the next minute or not. None of us know. So for us to live in that future without knowing, subhanAllah, so it's basically trusting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tawakkul is going empty-handed, but knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will pull you up. That's tawakkul, that's true tawakkul, that's certainty, that's yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm just going to explain to you this verse that I love so much. وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَصِيرٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. That's what you do when I'm talking about tafweed. What's tafweed? Tafweed in English, lawyers use that word. It's basically power of attorney. When you trust someone and you just give them, you can take care of my stuff on my behalf, and I trust that you do a good job. That's tafweed. And I loved how the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, used that specific word. It's basically giving agency to someone else, but it's not in this case someone else. It's tafweed to the creator of this universe, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I just want you guys, I'll finish off with this very, very quick exercise activity. I want you all to close your eyes. Okay, and imagine you're in an empty space, whatever you want that to be, in a forest, in a desert, in your house, just you by yourself. And then you want to start piling up all your problems in a pile in front of you. Okay, so detach yourself from that and just put everything that you can think of that worries you, that gives you anxiety, that gives you stress and worry, and just pile it up, everything in front of you, subhanAllah. And step back away from this now and look at it and detach. And in that scene that you're in right now, I just want you to put your head up in the sky and say, وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَصِيرٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. Ya Allah, I'm giving you full agency. And I trust you fully that you'll take care of all these problems of my pile that I have. And you never let me down, because you never have. Come back, sisters. How did that feel? Imagine practicing these things every single day. We've got the tools, alhamdulillah, in our religion, our faith, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala empowered us, and we just have to practice them and use them every day. Every single day until they become habits and parts of who we are, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair, subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka.
Thank you so much, Sister Dahlia. Now we're actually going to take that reflection exercise into a practical exercise by going into Maghrib Salat. So our Facebook audience, thank you so much for tuning in, and inshallah you enjoyed it. You don't have the opportunity to ask our speakers questions, but I'm sure if they commented or wrote on your page, inshallah things can be followed up by our Facebook audience. So thank you, and we will say then goodbye.